What sort of things did you do?
I spent a long time working in the EU, actually, as an international trade negotiator. I spent a couple of years managing development aid projects in some of the poorest countries in Asia. So I won a writing prize for the Financial Times, and I wrote for various newspapers. And a journalist is a rather adventurous noun for what I did. And then, of course, I was an MEP. I was a member of the European Parliament. And then I lectured at Cambridge and Sheffield universities. Gordon Brown, I think being in the Treasury for 10 years rather, I don't think it's very good for you, I don't think. I said to Brown, the opening line was your classic line. I said, he's the guy who promised to abolish boom and bust, but he's actually given us both because inflation is booming and the economy's gone bust. If you actually look at all the trends in terms of fuel prices, repossessions, consumer debt, we could have a really, really bad winter.
Yeah.
And so I basically said to him, aren't we basically headed to another winter, winter of discontent? In which he then reeled off another list of all the things he's done in his normal way. It's like mind-numbing stuff. Over the last 7 months, actually, I looked over it the other day. I looked at the list of the questions I've asked him. I've actually asked him about fuel poverty, for instance, I think on 4 occasions now. And he keeps coming back with little answers. So, you've got 5.5 million British families who are going to be in fuel poverty by this winter. And all that he's managed to do is extract about, by my reckoning, about 26 pence homelessness. The amount of 1.7 million people on the waiting list to get into social homes.
Yeah.
And all they've announced is some piffling amount of money, which would buy about fewer than 1,500 empty properties. It's this kind of mismatch. So the political point I was trying to make was, look, over the summer you've got to take a break, just look at the big picture and come back with bigger answers, because the scale of what we're up against in the winter is potentially huge.
Do you think Gordon Brown's confused as the rest of us? He comes out with all these, he sort of has his massive book with him, doesn't he? And he says all these figures, and do you think, I know when he mentions something, you just kind of got to take his word for it, because you're not going to have...
Just take his word, because you think, he's got all these figures and stuff. And
do you think he actually understands the massive thing, or the figures in front of him?
I don't know. I get the impression that he develops a almost sort of robotic tendency of just coming out with endless figures, as if the figures themselves solve the problem.
Yeah.
They don't. Figures don't make people feel that things, that the government's right. A statistic is not a very emotional thing, is it?
You mentioned housing problems. What would you do to solve them?
The main thing I think is you just simply got to have more social housing available. We don't have enough social housing available. And the way I would do that is by, in effect, allowing local authorities and social landlords to borrow more money than they're presently allowed to buy up empty housing.
Would you stop the standard social housing being lost to sort of right to buy schemes, or would you continue?
I've got no problem in principle with the idea of right to buy,
right.
But I think the way in which it's sometimes sort of foisted on some communities is, I've got a council estate in my constituency where people have been kind of almost pushed in that direction, which I don't think is a good thing. But I've got no problem with it in principle. But what I do have a problem with is that none of the social housing has been replenished or replaced. So there are now 1 million fewer social homes in this country. I'm talking about statistics. I'm not going to bore you with statistics. I'm just trying to spell it out to him in sort of words of one syllable. Listen, you've got a whole lot of people who are teetering on the edge of repossession and homelessness because they can't afford their mortgages. A 40% rise in the heating costs, which is what's going to happen between now and the next winter. It's just going to push a lot of these people into where on earth are they going to go?
So how would you, like you said, the possible winner of discontent if Gordon Brown carries on doing what you're doing, what would you do to kind of ease out the situation for people? Because obviously there's going to be energy rising with the petrol prices, obviously rising, but saying that Gordon Brown has freezed the 2p tax rate, although I personally don't think that's going to make much of a difference.
2p is going to make a difference.
Yeah, it's not going to make a massive difference.
Not at all. It's a symbolic thing.
This is obviously symbolic. I don't know what you mean.
It is symbolic, but it's not
enough to make
well, when set against the massive increase in the market prices of fuel, it's kind of...
Because I see it in my area, it goes up by about a penny a week. Petrol minimum, it goes up about a penny a week. Like, I went to Leeds over the weekend, they came back, it's gone up over 2 pence.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And it's just absolutely amazing, it's astonishing.
Yeah, it is amazing.
You can't even afford to go anywhere now.
No. And of course the public transport alternative is so expensive.
You've covered some of the things about making better insulated homes.
Yeah.
And I know that your party want to cut emissions by 80% by 2050, which is ahead of the government target. But how are you actually going to do this? Do you think taxation is going to be enough, or are we going to have to about other measures?
Oh, I think there's a whole range of measures. There's the energy efficiency agenda, which was talked about. I mean, if we improve energy efficiency in this country, particularly the housing stock, we're doing more than all of Gordon Brown's 8 nuclear power stations ever would do. You need to change the tax system dramatically. As a general principle, I think we should be putting more taxes on things that pollute and less taxes on people earning money. So lower income taxes, particularly for people on low and middle incomes, higher taxes for doing things which pollute. We need, I think, in the long run, this will probably take about 10, 15 years, but in the long run, I think we need to move completely to a different system of paying for people for using road space. We could introduce a road charging system on all motorways and trunk roads for which there is a public transport alternative. And in return, you could probably scrap vehicle excise duty altogether, create a national road toll system for heavy goods vehicles, use the revenue generated from that to invest very, very heavily in particularly intercity high-speed rail links. And you could, over a 10, 15-year period, transform our transport system.
One thing I really wanted to ask you was what your opinion of faith schools was. Firstly, do you think the state should be putting money into places that teach religion as part of what they teach? Another thing is, should they be legal? I mean, is it the right of a child to have a fair, even-handed education?
This is one of those issues, I'm afraid, where I think theory bumps up against kind of reality. Would you start an education system where we are now? No, you wouldn't.
No.
Let me be clear. I don't want to see faith schools act as engines of segregation, still less of prejudice, and so on.
Yeah.
The best faith schools, and there's some brilliant faith schools, for instance, in my constituency in Sheffield, actually do quite the reverse. Because faith is quite important to them, they do much, much more work than other schools do in creating links between different schools of different faiths, working in networks of schools in the local area. I think we can legitimately, as sort of politicians, put pressure on faith schools to act as engines of integration rather than segregation. I've never believed that the answer, so to speak, is to get rid of schools who in many communities are providing extremely good education to a lot of deprived children. I'm not persuaded at all that what we need to do is a sort of revolutionary approach of French-style secularism to be imposed across the education. I just think it would create a degree of disruption that would harm a lot of children, I think.